events of World War II. One other treasonous organization worth mentioning is the Union Banking Corporation of New York City. Not only did they finance numerous aspects of Hitler's rise to power, along with actual materials during the war, it was also a Nazi money laundering bank, which was eventually exposed for having millions of dollars of Nazi money in its vaults. The Union Banking Corporation of New York was eventually seized for violations of the Trading with the Enemy Act. Guess who the director and vice president of the Union Bank was? Prescott Bush, the father and grandfather of former U.S. Presidents George W. Bush and George H.W. Bush. Vietnam. The United States' official escalation and entry into the Vietnam War came after an alleged incident involving 2 U.S. destroyers being attacked by North Vietnamese PT boats in the Gulf of Tonkin. This was known as the Gulf of Tonkin Incident. This situation was the catalytic pretext for massive troop deployment and full-fledged warfare. One problem, however: the attack on the U.S. destroyers by Vietnamese PT boats never happened. Former Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara stated years later that the Gulf of Tonkin incident was a mistake, while declassified documents released years later show that it was a farce, manipulated for the purposes of war. And once in the war, it was business as usual. In October 1966, President Lyndon Johnson lifted trade restrictions on the Soviet bloc, knowing full well that the Soviets were providing upwards of 80% of North Vietnam's war supplies. Consequently, the Rockefeller interests financed factories in the Soviet Union, which the Soviets used to manufacture military equipment and send it to North Vietnam. However, the funding of both sides in this conflict was only one side of the coin. In 1985, were declassified. This detailed what American troops were and were not allowed to do in the war. It included such absurdities as North Vietnamese anti-aircraft missile systems could not be bombed until they were known to be fully operational. No enemy could be pursued once they crossed the border of Laos or Cambodia. And most revealing of all, the most critical strategic targets were not allowed to be attacked unless initiated by high military officials. Apart from these illogical limitations, North Vietnam was informed of these restrictions and therefore could base entire strategies around the limitations of the American forces. This is why the war went on for so long, and the bottom line is this: the Vietnam War was never meant to be won, just sustained. This war for profit and resources resulted in 58,000 American deaths and 3 million dead Vietnamese.
It goes on and on. These are the type of people we are dealing with. They have no value for human life. Will kill any amount of people for profit, no matter who they are. Even people of their own common descent and ethnicity. They feel power and or money is their only kind of loyalty to maybe their immediate house and family. That comes close. It's as if, and very well might be, that they have no loyalty and must feel no union with other forms of life. These Fed families are the same families, not coincidentally, of a group that you may have heard of called the Illuminati. Now, I'm not going to get into this too much. Call them what you will, but they are about 2 things: population reduction and world domination. If you want to do research yourself on fluoride and Agenda 21, this one here is pretty good. And there's a lot of other stuff you can go check out. Keep in mind, though, Ron Paul is the only candidate running that is informed and honest enough to remove fluoride from our water and allow unpasteurized milk to be produced. Sounds ridiculous, I understand, but they're screwing with us a little bit. Now, if you're like me, you may be thinking, how could this actually be allowed to happen? Who are these people? Is this real? What sweet fairy tale was I living in before, and can I ever get it back? Is there any place for it? Should this be happening? Is what these Illuminati people doing just the natural order of man? The swindling of the world of its wealth and keeping it for themselves? It almost makes sense. I mean, survival of the fittest, right? Of course there's an evil out there this extreme. Why not? There's these guys, and then there's Gandhi. 2 extremes. Well, in one way that's correct. It does make sense. And although I wouldn't do it, and I'd like to think my friends and family wouldn't do it, there are obviously some that don't look at humanity as a whole. as we are all one. And they, of course, are scared. They're beasts with massive egos that fear death because their ego is all they are. But from the best of our scientific knowledge, we are all one, point zero. And we need to respect each other as we would like to be respected, to give people their freedom to be themselves and not steal and lie to them, because it's like stealing and lying to yourself. That is the truth if you believe we are all one. And it's a nice way to live, that we are all one and should act accordingly, loving and respecting nature, ourselves, and the people around us. Any selfish and thus ultimately untrue reason we go against these things is detrimental towards truth and thus a life being lived in harmony with it. That which does not grow dies, and that which does not search for truth finds chaos and anarchy, lies in disharmony, death and decay in every facet of their life. It is our responsibility to always search for truth without ourselves involved. Gnothi, Seauton. Know thyself. Know yourself, so you can get over yourself and hopefully be one with the truth and life. Now, I'll admit there are a lot of times when I look around and think we're horrible and petty creatures, only thinking with our groin and ignoring the fact that we even have a frontal lobe altogether. We're greedy, insecure, ruthless, and are self-centered and unharmonious desires and actions. I think maybe they're right. Let's get rid of us. We're a cancer to the earth, with no good excuse for our actions, and do nothing to represent the inherent beauty in nature. But then I found out about some things and realized we may just have an excuse. I mean, look at all they have done. Look at the great men they have killed and what they have suppressed from our knowledge and way of life. Look at all the chaos they've created, the wars they've forged. And it all boils down to this. The presidents that don't do anything to abolish the Fed are simply part of the conspiracy, part of the Illuminati, whatever. Anti-U.S., bottom line. No two ways about it. I mean, they know what it's about, how it was conceived and by whom. They know it's illegal and who its beneficiaries are. They know how bad it is for America and its citizens, and they do nothing. In fact, they endorse it and further their plunder, while continuing to keep it secret and pretending it's nothing and not important, just so they don't shake the status quo and put themselves out there as bait for the media to attack and for people to question and be the black sheep, like Ron Paul is so willing to do, because it's the truth, and he doesn't care, because he doesn't have a big ego. It's the message that is important to him. And what these other guys are doing, I would say is, close to downright treasonous and just a massive lie on a massive scale. Perhaps the largest untruth, biggest lie ever told. And it has caused and is causing pain and suffering on an equal scale. I'm doing my best to live my life happily, living dreams the way I was. But I now also realize that there is something else I must do to be happy. I mean, these guys are influencing society in so many different ways, and they're doing it in order to create chaos and misery. As I said, they create a problem, then provide a solution. That is what they do. This is what they do. This is the problem. Before I knew that, I used to think that humanity was a mess, that we just couldn't do things gracefully. But I'm finding out that it's them that just may be hindering us, and have been doing a great job at it for a long time, so manipulative. Imagine a world without their influence. I mean, I think it would be closer to a naturally harmonious and peaceful way of life together, without this dark, meddling cloud intentionally spreading lies, confusion, and perversion, killing or using their power to manipulate or skew those who get in their way. I mean, I guess there's a yin and a yang, and there's a place for yin. Light and dark. You can't have one without the other. But they're given more yin than they're allowed, and it's overshadowing the entire world now, and something must be done. We can make good decisions on our own. The president can guide the way his country acts, and Ron Paul's message is one of self-reliance and making good decisions on your own, not being told what to do. It's a personal responsibility, and it's empowering, It empowers the mind, the spirit, our inner creativity. It will give us the courage and wisdom to thrive and rely on our own, so we can be a positive influence to the rest of the world. Also, while respecting their own values and personal space to grow. It's time for us to start taking responsibility for ourselves and our happiness. A job is not a right, but they should be available to create. And with the freedom of no income tax, less federal regulations, and killed conspiracies and killed secret agendas, it will be all that much easier. And I'm almost done here. I'll just say it again. I know this is scary, but don't shut your eyes to it and hope it will go away. It won't. If nothing else, it's a huge injustice that's going on, and it will feel good to do any little thing to try and correct it. Or breathe life into you, truth into you. Bring you closer to a harmony with nature and the way things ought to be in harmony with it. You see the truth behind the scenes. You see the corruption. You see why things are so chaotic and miserable. You see why there is dysfunction, perversion, and confusion in life and society, and it all starts to make sense. And you see how it could be without all that manipulation. It's a faith in natural harmony that we could one day reach if we just beat these lies and this corruption down. There's no longer time for corrupt politicians. Ron Paul is the only one who will end the Federal Reserve, and thus the only person worthy to be in charge right now. This is our last great chance at salvation, and it's closing in fast. We must beat their media and the distortion of Ron Paul and allow his words and the truth to get out to as many people as we can. I'm not going to get into 9/11 too much here. I did find this video the other day, and it's of a ex-CIA agent. And since it's been 10 years, she finally has the legal right to tell what she knows. And she knows a lot. But I'm only going to show you, I'm going to try to get her about down to 3 or 4 minutes. But the whole video is pretty good. I'll put that address down right now. That's to see the whole video. But right now I'll just show you a little clip.